Good to see you all. Thanks for coming. I know everybody is being pulled 20 ways, but I appreciate you being here. We're here to discuss what we've been discussing, how to make government more efficient and effective, and making sure we ensure the taxpayers' money is being spent the best way it possibly can. You know, when we did the Recovery Act, and again, thank all of you for the job you did on that, it was nearly $800 billion, and we saw just a fraction of 1% of it going to fraudulent purposes or purposes that were unintended. So we decided to use the template that you all worked out on the Recovery Act for every government program, quite frankly, because it's the best way for us to be able to, we concluded, to save money in applying the lessons that this one specific piece of legislation provided for us on a government-wide effort. And one of those lessons was getting the principals engaged in the day-to-day operation. Now, Tim hasn't had much to do lately. I mean, and some of you are probably wondering why in the hell has he been drugged back from Europe to figure out how to save money at Treasury? Because guess what? We learned that all of you and all of the cabinet secretaries, unless I'm engaged, you're specifically engaged, we're each specifically, held responsible, it just doesn't get done. And so that's when the president asked me to do this, you guys knew I'd come back to you and ask you to do the same thing. And so the last time we met a few months ago, we talked about the personal accountability we each felt to get this done. And the good news is you've made some welcome changes already in our overall effort to fundamentally reduce the cost of providing the services of government for the American people. We're going to hear first from Secretary Geithner, who's going to talk about dollar coins. Right now, the law requires us to make dollar coins featuring every deceased president of the United States. They make hundreds of millions of these coins every year. 40% of them end up being returned to the Federal Reserve because nobody wants them. And here's the worst part. We're still making coins with presidents from the 1800s, meaning the United States Mint is about halfway through its planned production. And as it will shock you all, the call for Chester A. Arthur coins is not big. And I don't mean to comment on his presidency, but it just is not very high, surprisingly, to my shock and dismay. So as a result, this is the way things slip through unless we focus on them. As a result, nearly $1.4 billion in dollar coins are sitting in the Federal Reserve bank vaults right now, literally just sitting around unused. And until today, the Mint was scheduled to make 1.6 billion additional dollar coins over the next 5 years. Well, no more. From now on, we're only going to make as many coins as collectors demand, and we're going to charge a premium for the coins, so it doesn't cost us a dime to make those dollar coins. And no matter whose president's face is on the coin. And so this, in a sense, is not complicated stuff, but it's pretty simple. Nobody wants these things. If they don't want them, we shouldn't keep making them. And that simple change is going to save $50 million a year. Then we're going to hear from Secretary Sebelius, who's going to talk about the Department of Health and Human Services and their new effort to stop OxyContin and Percocet fraud in Medicare. Right now, some patients go around to multiple doctors collecting prescriptions for these same drugs. In fact, the Government Accountability Office found that Medicare beneficiaries who got one Medicare beneficiary, excuse me, who got OxyContin prescriptions from 58 different doctors, 58. We think prescription drug providers can help us stop this. Excuse me, I apologize. Sound like I need a prescription. There are already processes. They already process all of the patient's prescriptions, so they have the ability to spot suspicious patterns. Before now, some drug plans were still paying for drugs and sending Medicare the bill even when they saw these suspicious patterns. So starting today, and Kathleen will talk about this, if any company sees signs of fraud, we're directing them not to pay until they make sure the claim isn't fraudulent. Finally, we're going to hear from Deputy Attorney General Jim Cole, and he's going to tell us that last year the Department of Justice recovered more than $5.6 billion in fraud against taxpayers. And let me give you an example. Last year, the Department of Justice found that a company called American Grocers was selling to the military food where the expiration date has passed on that food to safely sell it. They'd buy on the cheap because they they buy the food that literally had passed an expiration date. Then they'd alter the expiration date on the label of the food. And here's the worst part. They then sell it at a steep markup to the government to serve to American troops serving in Iraq. My guess is I ate a lot of that food in my 19 trips, but all kidding aside, you know, these guys are so eager to make a buck, they sold spoiled food to our warriors in a battle zone. So justice went after them, and we sent the owner of American Grocers to jail for 2 years. Thank you so much. And recovered $15 million from the company. We also dramatically expanded what we call Medicare fraud strike forces since we took office. We took some of the best agents the FBI has and linked them up with the HHS Inspector General's office, experts in healthcare fraud, put them in together in the cities where we'd seen a lot of healthcare fraud. And we teamed those agents with prosecutors who were focused exclusively on prosecuting healthcare fraud. The agents and the prosecutors work together to analyze the Medicare data. They're experts in the area and in real time, so they can look at suspicious activities like a particular provider billing more often than you'd expect for an expensive service. Since they started working together and looking at this data in real time, they've been able to bring some pretty big cases quickly, sometimes while the fraud is happening instead of after it's ended. Well, when the administration took office, there were 2 strike force teams. Now we've got strike force teams in 9 different cities, and they've gotten results. In 2008, they brought cases against $384 million in alleged fraud. This year, they brought cases against over $1 billion worth of alleged fraud and returned $7 for every dollar spent in the investigation and the prosecution. That's the kind of thing that's happening throughout the government in each of our departments, each of your departments, and this effort involves a lot more than just eliminating waste and fraud. It means instilling a new culture of efficiency in each of our agencies, greater responsibility and responsiveness and accountability. So we are intent, the President and I and all of you, I know, are intent on changing the way government does business. We're working to give the American taxpayers, the American people, what they expect and what they deserve for their tax dollars. And so now I'd like to turn to Secretary Geithner to talk about what his department is just doing, and then I'm going to turn to Secretary Sebelius, and then I'm going to turn to Justice and hear from Jim Cole. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. At the President's direction and under relentless pressure from you, we've been looking for ways to...
You guys love my calls, don't you?
To make sure that the things Congress asks us to do, we're doing more efficiently, at less cost to the taxpayer, use the taxpayer's resources more wisely. And as you said, one area we can do that is by reducing the current surplus inventory of dollar coins that are out there. And I have directed the U.S. Mint to suspend the production of new presidential dollar coins for circulation effective immediately. Now, why do we have this problem? Congress passed a law in 2005 that mandated that the Mint issue 4 new presidential dollar coins each year from 2007 to 2016. The problem is there's not much demand out there for these coins, so we've been producing, storing coins that people don't want to hold, and that costs money. So we've been accumulating in the vaults of the Federal Reserve lots and lots of dollar coins. I think we're now approaching nearly $1.4 billion in surplus dollar coins. By suspending production of these coins, as the Vice President said, we're going to save the taxpayers about $50 million a year. That's a meaningful chunk of money. And it builds, Mr. Vice President, on a series of actions the Treasury's taken over the last several years to get more efficient in conducting the basic financial business of the country. I'll just give you a couple examples. We're moving the country to electronic payments, saving hundreds of millions of dollars over 5 years. We're trying to make it easier for millions of Americans to file their tax returns electronically, also saving hundreds of millions of dollars of resources. We're going to keep looking for more opportunities to doing this. We shouldn't be wasting money on money. We shouldn't be wasting money on conducting the basic financial business of the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kathleen?
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice President. And like Secretary Geithner, we do love to get your calls. And we have appreciated, though, really your challenge to enhance our focus on some very important initiatives, making sure that we are spending our resources wisely. And at HHS, we've made cracking down on waste, fraud, and abuse in both the Medicare and Medicaid program a real focus from the beginning of this administration. Last year, with our great partners at Justice, we had some very significant anti-fraud efforts returning billions to the Medicare Trust Fund, and that then means that those dollars are spent on essential health services and not on criminal activities. And this year we've taken some additional steps, new technology and outreach efforts to make historic reductions in Medicare improper payments, and again, saving taxpayers billions of dollars and putting Medicare on a stronger, more sustainable footing for years to come. Today's announcement is another piece of that puzzle. So as you said, Mr. Vice President, prescription drug plans already have the information to spot fraud and help us stop it. So in addition to encouraging plans to withhold payments, we also want to give the Part D drug plans a range of options that will enlist them as helpers in this fraud-fighting effort. We want to make it easier for plans to report fraud to HHS and law enforcement and encourage the drug plans to work with healthcare providers to shorten the length of prescription if the doctor, nurse, or plan is suspicious of fraud. The initiatives not only save money for Medicare programs, but in this case, we're also saving lives. The misuse and abuse of prescription drugs leads to more than 475,000 emergency room visits every year, and unfortunately, a number of those result in deaths. So we're taking every action we can to get dangerous drugs out of criminals' hands and at the same time return funds to the Medicare Trust Fund. Now, 2 months ago, we announced that there has never been a worse time to try and steal from Medicare, and we're going to continue those efforts, this time looking at the abuses of OxyContin and Percocet and other enhanced drugs to not only stamp out the fraudulent activity, but to make sure Medicare is more solvent. We are going to continue to work on the waste, fraud, and abuse in the healthcare programs, and I'd like to now turn it over to our good partner at Justice, Deputy Attorney General Jim Cole.
Thank you, Secretary Sebelius, and thank you, Mr. Vice President, for the kind words and the trumpeting of the accomplishments we've had at the Justice Department. This past year, with the help of law enforcement partners like HHS, as you noted, the department recovered over $5.6 billion, that's billion with a B, criminal and civil fraud proceeds on behalf of the American people. That amount is more than has ever been recovered in a single year in the history of the Department of Justice. and it is more than double the amount that was recovered in 2008, the year before this administration took office. These recoveries far exceed the cost of the agents and the prosecutors who secured them. As the Vice President noted, for every dollar Congress has provided for health care enforcement over the past 3 years, we have recovered nearly $7. The fraud recoveries that make up the $5.6 billion run the gamut, from health care fraud to grant fraud, from mortgage fraud to procurement fraud. Now you can hear me. But at the end of the day, each of these cases had the same victim, which was the American taxpayer. Let me give you 2 quick examples. We recovered $900 million from 8 drug companies that engaged in a scheme to report false and inflated prices for numerous drugs. By inflating the prices that they report, these 8 manufacturers caused fraudulent claims to be submitted to federal health care programs like Medicare, and as a result, the government paid hundreds of millions of dollars in excess of what the claim should have been. We also saw significant recoveries in procurement fraud cases. In communities across the country, law enforcement officers put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe. We at one point heard an allegation that companies and their executives were involved in the manufacture and sale of defective bulletproof vests that were purchased by federal, state, and local and tribal law enforcement agencies with federal funds. When we heard this, we took action. These vests contained ballistic pads made from a material called Xylon, and several law enforcement officers were seriously injured while wearing these vests. They didn't perform to expectations. To date, the department's multi-year effort, which is still ongoing, has been able to recover more than $61 million in settlements from 10 different companies. Our results speak volumes, and our message could not be clearer. We will aggressively investigate and hold accountable those who seek to defraud the American taxpayers. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Jim, thanks. Look, I know each of your departments are moving and have moved and are going to continue to move and have saved money already. But one of the things that, in addition to the regular reports y'all are sending in to Jack, Lou, and to us, remind everybody the President's executive order that he signed in November calls for a 20% reduction in spending on travel, printing, and administrative expenses. Now, I know you all have major efforts underway in each of your departments, but when we meet in March is when we're going to be meeting again. In a minute, Jack and Jeff are gonna ask you to be prepared and what they expect the progress report to be come March. So you can provide all of us a detailed, specific report on the dollars that you have saved and the cost-saving measures you have put in place and are continuing to put in place in each of your departments. And so at our next meeting, we want to be able to show real measurable progress in the President's executive order. And that's happening in the executive department as well. And so that's what we're going to talk about for a minute now. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jack and to Jeff.